On the day my father disowned me, it was pouring sporadically, not in a symbolic sense. In fact, it was raining sideways, with that ferocious Manhattan wind that catches the storm and slams it against the windows as if it had a particular message. I was 22. Business school is almost over, nervous to the core, polished heels. I believed that wearing a cream jacket gave the impression that I was a trustworthy individual with a division of a multinational corporation. As it happens, I appeared more like a joke. We were in Harrison Industries' corporate conference room, which had chrome accents, floor-to-ceiling glass, and seats that were more expensive than my tuition. My father's face was flushed like a warning light as he stood at the head of the table. "Inept!" he yelled and flung a pile of papers so forcefully that they slid to the edge as if they were about to jump. I kept my eyes off Michael. Couldn't, since I was previously aware. "Do you know how much we might have lost as a result of your error?" my dad said. "Emma, this isn't school. This round isn't a practice. The Harrison legacy is this. You simply struck a match beneath it." I parted my lips. I closed it one more. I had a dry throat. I said in a whisper, "I can fix it. It's only a draft contract. It hasn't been successful. This cannot be fixed." My father didn't have that voice. Michael was the one. It was Michael, of course. His grin was so broad, you could drive a truck through it, and he was sitting with 2 chairs down, as if he already owned the place. He remarked, "You almost sold our shipping division for half its value. Stupidity like that cannot be fixed." The remarks struck more forcefully than they ought to have, most likely because I trusted them. Or at least, I did, in part. The reality. I had included out-of-date valuation figures in a draft sale that did not take into consideration our recent fleet purchases. A stupid error. Additionally, it was caught in time. Before signing, it was flagged. Not a catastrophe. However, not a disaster was insufficient in that space and under that moniker. "I had faith in you," my dad said. It was worse than shouting, too. He had lowered his voice to the low, surgical tone he used when he intended to make a clean cut. "I provided you an opportunity to establish your worth, and this is how you pay that back." Silently, I stood there. It was heartbreaking enough to hear. The door opened. My mom entered like a phantom wearing high-end shoes. Her entire appearance was well planned, including her tight bun, Chanel outfit, and lipstick that remained flawless even as she lied, which was frequently. As if making a weather-related remark, she stated, "The board is waiting." My dad adjusted his necktie. He said, "We'll finish this later." We didn't. I was called that evening. His office, the one with the leather seats and the walls that vibrate with cigars. Decisions about the empire had been taken in that chamber by Harrison men for 3 generations. I was going to be banished from it as the first woman. Without introducing himself, he said, "You're done. The board is no longer confident. Harrison Industries has terminated your employment." With instant effect. Similar to a sentence. Similar to death. I gazed at him. "Please." "Dad, there was only one error." He didn't raise his head. "An error we cannot afford. You're letting me go. I am your daughter. That's precisely why this hurts." Bullshit. He had always loved the company more than he loved his kids. He said, "You'll get 6 months severance. You're on your own after that." I chuckled. A single gasp of incredulity. I hadn't even heard my mother enter when her voice interrupted from behind. "We've set you up with a job in Seattle. With your uncle. Keep quiet. Honorable. Enough distance to allow this to pass." I pivoted. "Do you wish for me to depart from New York?" "Like a silk-wrapped robot," she declared. "Want has nothing to do with it. The choice has been made." There I stood, frozen. Then I posed the one question that was actually important. "And if I decline?" At that moment, my dad looked up. "You're cut off if you refuse," he replied. "No severance. No assistance. Not a family." I gave them both a look. The people who brought me up pushed me, made me into a sharp object, and became enraged when I cut myself. A few options. I didn't say goodbye. That night, only one individual spoke. My grandfather, Harrison Thomas. Anyone who mattered would tell you that Harrison was the real one. He transformed a small local shipping company into a multinational conglomerate. Additionally, he had always harbored affection for me, as if he still owned my father's study. He barked. Jack, you fool! You don't know what you're discarding. My dad refused to back down. The board, Grandpa chuckled, brittly and bitterly. You mean those men who said yes? Who forgot what this fucking house was built of? He faced me. Something soft burst into his face. Emma, join me for a stay. We'll make this right. I shook my head, though. My hands continued to shake. I still had a tight chest, and the embarrassment was still too recent. No, I replied. They made a decision. He didn't dispute. He simply glanced at me as if he had noticed something I hadn't yet noticed. I stayed at a hotel off Lexington Avenue that evening. I used my own card, after they stopped the company accounts. It would soon be my only card. I opened my laptop while sitting on the bed, which has a floral print that is trying far too hard to seem like home, pulled up the contract, and stopped. There was a problem. The distance, the edges, the language sounded different from who I am. I was familiar with my own work. One had written hundreds of memos for internal use. I had some stylistic habits that I always followed, peculiarities in formatting, shorthand for the law. I didn't write this draft. I opened my backup disk, located the original. Both were cross-referenced. It had been changed by someone, prior to it entering the boardroom, prior to it being turned against me. Someone wanted me to fail, and I knew who it was. It buzzed on my phone. An announcement from Grandpa. Nothing is as it seems. Observe. Hold on. Study up. I shut down my laptop, approached the window, watched as the rain, with nowhere left to fall, streaked down the glass like tears. My great-grandfather passed the business on to Grandpa 10 years ago, skipping his eldest son. I came to the realization that this family's history tends to repeat itself. I grinned. Only a bit. Then, in a whisper to nobody, all right. Come on, let's play. The quiet nature of starting over is something they seldom mention. There isn't a significant, dramatic scene. Don't play loud music. No montage of you holding your suitcase and crying as you say farewell. You alone, in an odd apartment, hearing the sound of someone else's refrigerator, gazing at walls that are unaware of your identity. Boston is where I ended up. No strategy. I purchased a one-way ticket at 3 in the morning with trembling hands and enough severance to last me a while. I declined the Seattle job offer, not able to accomplish it. I couldn't pretend to be appreciative when they ignored me like a flawed heir. Rather, I constructed something. Tiny. Keep quiet. Phoenix Maritime Solutions is a consultancy. First, just me, then a graduate school friend, then another. We concentrated on logistics, solving issues, low-key activities, contracts that paid the rent, but didn't garner much attention. I did not include my last name on the documents, listed no prior experience, didn't discuss the family. I wanted to vanish for the first time in my life. My granddad continued to text, occasionally, once every 7 days. Months would occasionally pass, always brief, always mysterious. Observe the manifestation of the Singapore route. An examination of Clause 9.1 in the Anderson merger. The game is not played in boardrooms, but in shadows. I never answered. However, I read them every time. The track was always followed. I was learning from him, slowly, silently, as if an elderly military general were distributing charts beneath the table, and I immersed myself in the work for the first year. I created something tangible. We gained a reputation for tidying up mess, bringing order out of chaos, ports, obtaining a license, chains of procurement, things that no suit-wearing person wants to handle. My clients appreciated that I didn't talk a lot, that I didn't require attention. They didn't recognize me, and that's how I liked it. The first break followed. First, there was a drink. A man, Ben, good, astute, an engineer in the maritime field. I nearly missed the Port Authority mixer where we had met. I laughed at him, made me temporarily forget who I was before. We began dating. After a few months, I relaxed. I didn't tell him everything, but enough. Enough to give me hope that I might not have to bear it alone. He made all the correct statements that I wasn't worthy of my family, that their actions were heinous, that he supported me, and I believed him for a second. I allowed myself to be human for a brief minute. When I entered a Newbury Street restaurant 3 weeks later, I noticed him dining with my brother, Michael. He failed to notice me. However, I saw enough. Ben's birthday watch that I got him gleaming in the light. Michael's shark smile was visible as he leaned forward. Before anyone could notice, I turned and walked away. Didn't weep. I simply ceased to feel anything. Went home. All of the messages were erased. Each picture, each and every trace. The following day, the locks were changed. That evening, my grandfather gave me a call. We had never had a phone conversation. Always send a text. But he called that evening. I allowed it to ring, then responded. "Emma," he said. "Only my name." No inquiries. On the kitchen floor, I took a seat. "Why does it continue to occur?" I asked, unsure of my exact meaning. "What makes it always end up with them?" he said quietly. "Because you frighten them." I chuckled. "I manage a business with 4 employees and live above a Vietnamese bakery." "That's not the point. You're intelligent enough to know that." A long pause ensued. "The sort that lasts for years." Then he said, "Emma, you were never meant to be in charge of Harrison Industries. Not to them. You served as insurance, polished backup, someone to shelf after trotting out when necessary." I remained silent. He remarked, "They didn't ruin your future. They made it public." It was like a punch to me. The clarity. I was never supposed to be seated at the table. Not at all. The way was set when Michael was old enough to put 2 sentences together without choking on his own pride. I had served as the diversion and Plan B, the obedient daughter who didn't pose a threat but appeared fine on paper. Until I did. Until I approached too closely. Then, I was scorched by them, or attempted to. Here's the problem about fire, though. It doesn't always demolish. It reforges occasionally. In my second year, I came out of hiding, not in a sensational, news release fashion. Simply, quietly quit acting like you're smaller than me. I made a wiser hiring decision, took on larger contracts. I resumed attending conferences, where people gave my last name a second look. I haven't spoken to my family yet. I didn't read any of the Christmas cards, but I still tore them up. However, I paid attention, observed, waited, exactly as he instructed. He sent a strange SMS one day. Clause 23.4, Section B. That was it. It had been a while since I had given the initial contract any thought. However, I managed to pull it up. I stored the unaltered copy on 3 separate devices, and there it was. The original signatory shall retain first right of refusal over all Pacific Rim shipping routes and related infrastructure in the event of division restructuring or transfer of assets. States Clause 23.4b. I sat motionless for a while, merely looking at the text, due to that clause. It had no significance, until the business changed its structure. And you know what? The name Singapore was merely texted by my granddad. The months that followed were a blur. I relocated the business. The personnel was doubled. Our branding was reorganized. Small, but nimble. Phoenix Maritime emerged as a player. I began gathering behind the scenes. Not cash, details. Minutes of the board. Debt rumors. Rumors of supply chain breakdowns. I tightened the thread every time Michael was featured on the cover of another magazine. And everything began to fall, apart the more tightly I pulled. After 3 years, I had a face-to-face encounter with my grandfather. We didn't ever embrace. He wasn't the type to give hugs, however. He grinned. He handed me a sealed packet and remarked, "You've been busy." There were shareholder notes, corporate memos, and shipping manifests within. He declared, "Michael is growing in Asia. However, he is mortgaging the business to do it. What about the collateral?" He grinned once more. "Our vessels, your routes." He leaned closer. "He is unaware that they belong to you." I stood in my apartment that evening and gazed at the framed picture of my team that was hanging on the office wall. We had made it through, expanded, and nobody knew that. Their golden CEO had destroyed the same person who oversaw their logistics company. a quiet woman. I didn't get any sleep that evening, didn't weep either. I was thinking as I watched the Boston lights fade into the morning. Forgiveness is not where this ends. When they eventually realize what they threw away, it's over. I didn't want to answer the phone when it first came up. My phone buzzed 3 times in a row as I was in a client meeting regarding a failed Tacoma port expansion. Unknown figure. The same figure. Consecutively. I told the client I needed 5 minutes and went outdoors. They gave a nod. They might notice a change in my face. I believe. I was standing in the corridor, concrete flooring, smelled of burnt coffee and printer toner. And I replied, Emma Harrison. Yes. This is Manhattan General's Dr. Lennox. Thomas Harrison is the reason I'm calling. My chest became motionless. The kind of stillness that makes it difficult to breathe, the doctor said. He had a stroke. Very large. We exerted every effort. I was christened at the same church as the funeral. It had been 20 years since my last visit. There were mahogany pews and individuals acting as though they weren't relieved. Press, legacy, and flawless stance abound, packed with falsehoods. The eulogy was given by Michael, as if he had earned it. He stood at the front, sounded as though he had learned everything from our grandfather. When he stated it, he didn't even wince. Additionally, I almost burst out laughing. That's right, behind one of the pillars in the third row. I nearly forgot. The sound of it all being so ridiculous. I folded my hands in my lap instead. I counted my breaths. I kept a close eye on my family, much like an anthropological would on a dying species. My folks didn't talk to me, didn't even give me a glance. This provided me with all the information I required. They were aware, not all of it, but enough. I departed prior to the reception. Didn't want the appetizers. I didn't want to pretend to be courteous. Instead, I went directly to my lawyer's office. Your granddad was. She placed a folder on the glass table between us and remarked, meticulous. Next week is when he planned to have his will read. In person. Every stockholder. No exclusions. He did. Of course, I replied. She arched an eyebrow. Are you not shocked? No. He plays just like this. Even now. She paused. There's another thing. Another envelope was thrust forward by her. He left you this. To be unveiled in privacy. I took a while to open it. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, staring at the envelope as if it were about to bite. It was substantial, heavy. There was a slight scent of his aftershave, which he only used when writing quarterly reports. I slowly opened it. 3 items were found inside. A letter, my contract, a printed copy of the original agreement, a picture. It was the picture that struck first. It had a gritty texture, low resolution. However, it's enough obvious. Michael, within the executive office, positioned above my laptop. The timestamp corresponded to the precise hour when the contract's final draft was printed for board review. He had changed it on his own. Didn't even try to hide his identity. I spent a lot of time looking at that picture. Didn't weep. Didn't become angry. I simply sat there, like the emergence of a bruise. It was a brief letter. I typed, Emma, you were never seen by the board. They failed at that, not yours. You've been learning for the past 10 years, something they never had the patience for. Listening, constructing from the ground up. They will never understand this sector as well as you do. And now I've made sure the appropriate folks are paying attention. Complete the task we began. Additionally, keep in mind that the queen never rushes. However, as she moves, that was it. No farewells, no emotion, just permission. The following 7 days were spent preparing for war without noise. But war nonetheless. Every paper he ever sent me was examined by me. Each and every email, each text, each breadcrumb. 10 years of contracts, .mergers, .licenses, whispers, .board votes, .supplier defaults, route adjustments, and sham organizations were all included in the timeline I put together. In my workplace, I laid everything out on 3 walls. My group believed I was preparing a worldwide deployment. They were correct. I dressed in armor the morning of the will reading, gray, charcoal suit, customized. They are sharp enough to cut through tendon. My mother would have been pleased with the way my hair was pulled back in a knot. I have a printed copy of Clause 23.4b in my handbag. Documents in my briefcase. Proof. Make use of leverage. Fire runs into my veins. I didn't shudder. Not now. It was an uptown legal office. Smooth, chilly. The sort of setting where silence and glass spoke for themselves. It seemed as though someone had hit the pause button as the elevator doors opened. My dad's coffee fell. There was a tiny break in my mother's. Smile. Michael went gray. And me. I simply entered, as if I were supposed to be there. Since I did, the reading began. First, Mr. Caldwell, the lawyer, went over the standard material. Antiques, jewels, contributions. When my mother received his cufflinks, she broke down in tears. The growth of the trust fund appeared to gratify my father. Caldwell cleared his throat after that. And now, issues with Harrison Industries. When Michael heard the goodie bag open, he leaned forward like a puppy. However, then, with his eyes darting to his, Caldwell stated, "Your position was designated as interim, awaiting this reading." Michael blinked. "What? You were appointed acting CEO by the board. In the short term, the contents of Thomas Harrison's will include more instructions." He produced a sheet of paper, the one I knew. "The agreement. My agreement," Caldwell read. "I leave these words to my grandson. Michael, power without understanding is a ship without a rudder. You wanted to be in charge, but never inquired as to why the ship floated at all." Michael got up. "This is ridiculous." Sharper now, Caldwell urged. "Sit down." "We're not finished." The board members moved around in their chairs. A few others cleared their throats. One grabbed his phone. Caldwell went on. "A document was changed to disparage Emma Harrison 10 years ago. That change was not an error." He gave me a glance. I got up, slowly, displayed the picture, the file that Michael used to expel me. I didn't own it. It was changed. By him, after business hours, on my laptop. There was silence in the room, colder than it was. My dad's jaw dropped, closed. "Nothing to say," Caldwell went on. "And one more thing." He pulled out another folder, one of my favorite clauses, the one that's hidden, because they believed I was already gone. No one had bothered to read it. Clause 23.4b, I murmured. "The original signatory has the first right of refusal over all Pacific Rim routes in the event of a restructuring or asset transfer." Michael gave a snort. "We're not reorganizing, you are." I interrupted. "You recently revealed the Singapore Agreement. It calls for the sale of marine infrastructure, which implies that you require my blessing, and you refuse to give it." "That's right." The board sprung with activity. Phones are off, whispers, shouts. I waited. Let me absorb it. Like a long drought's thunder. Then Caldwell spoke louder, and in accordance with the will. "Emma Harrison now owns the majority of Harrison Industries shares, effective immediately." A pin could have dropped. Michael's voice then broke. "This isn't legal. My dad didn't answer." Caldwell slipped a financial report in front of him, and he was looking at it. A report detailing all the bad choices Michael had made during the previous decade. Evidence, everything. And all of a sudden, I was no longer treated like a child by anyone. I took a step forward. I took out my briefcase. Contracts were laid out. Plans, roadmaps. I introduced myself as Phoenix Maritime, my business, constructed from the ground up. "The channels you lost have been secured by us. You neglected your clients. The confidence you betrayed." I then turned to face Michael. "No, you don't employ me." I looked at the board. "I employ you." The stress of the Crown regaining the company wasn't the most difficult part. It was discovering what they had left behind when they walked into the workplace the following morning. There should be a fight, right? A little last-minute opposition. However, they simply vanished. Like rats escaping a dying ship, they are silent. Before noon, Michael left. A drawer full of unpaid invoices. 2 empty whiskey bottles and a broken stapler were left behind. Not a word. Don't apologize. Simply, quiet. I was in the center of the office that had belonged to my grandfather, the one with the carpet, the brass lights, and the view of the river. Furthermore, I didn't feel victorious. I sensed exhausted. as if I had scaled the mountain and discovered ashes at the summit. It was a chaotic first week. Every hour, shareholders called. Reporters set up camp outside the structure. Members of the board rushed to choose their allegiances. I didn't shout, did not grandstand. I just started working, pulled the figures, met with the heads of each department, outlined exactly what needed to be rebuilt, from the ground up and what was broken. I didn't come to pretend to be CEO, to be one. I was there. A few workers departed, couldn't stand being subordinate to me. Or perhaps they simply couldn't believe the girl who had been their junior intern was now in charge of the empire. Others remained. In the beginning, people I had never met entered my office, met my eyes, and said, "I believed they were mistaken about you. I'm glad I was correct." When I heard it, I didn't cry. I simply nodded. "Thank you," I told them. Went back to work after that. The damage reports began to come in the second week. Complete contracts are absent. Shell company leased warehouses. Handshake agreements for licensing promise, no paper trace. Michael hadn't simply made a mistake. He had completely destroyed. It sold future stability for Forbes interviews and magazine covers. My dad had turned his head away. Despite everything, my mother had maintained a funeral hostess grin. Additionally, our business was in dire straits. My nights were spent at work. On occasion, I would doze off on the worn leather couch beneath the window. Spreadsheets stuck to my face as I woke up. I hung up the phone, even ceased communicating with my Boston team. Phoenix Maritime knew the routine and was operating smoothly, but now Harrison needed me completely. The entire battle, the entire fire. After 3 weeks, I discovered a folder titled Insurance in a locked drawer on my grandfather's desk. There were handwritten notes within, scribbles on the margins, news items that have been clipped, red ink annotated printouts of Michael's initial transactions. One page simply stated, "The loudest voice will be followed. Verify that it belongs to you." Another, "Avoid outshining them too soon. You'll get your wings chopped. Give the impression that you're sleeping, then take off." He was aware. Everything. And long before I knew it, he had been constructing this plan with me in mind. The folder had one more item, a thumb drive. With trembling hands, I inserted it into my laptop. There are video files inside. Secret video footage, Michael.gatherings, bribes. My father is heard telling a lawyer to expedite my severance without a board review. Emails that my mother's aide forwarded, demonstrating her expertise in the field. For hours, I gazed at the screen. The previous video was not played. Did not have to. I had already realized by then, I was not exiled due to the contract. I was banished because I posed a threat. Since I witnessed too much, learned too quickly, refused to be silent. On day 23, I had another meeting with the board, laid everything out. The papers, the video, the trail of finances. Told them that they could either work with me to rebuild this business or put yourself out of the way. The majority stayed. Those that didn't, they weren't fired by me. I simply ceased answering their emails. The following morning, one of them cornered me in the elevator. "You believe that you are superior to us." He uttered those words. I stared at him for quite a while. "No," I replied. "I believe I've cleaned up." The doors were opened. I left. At last, my parents called. My mother comes first. Next, my dad. They then formally invited each other to supper after 2 weeks of silence. No subject line. Simply, "Let's have a conversation." I didn't respond, didn't go, did not have to, because by that time, they never grasped what I understood. Loyalty is not synonymous with family. Ownership is not the same as legacy. Furthermore, heredity is not a source of power, real power. It originates from the things you create while no one is looking. After a month, the media shifted their position. The Comeback Queen by Harrison. From banishment to power. They tried to erase me was the headline of a profile published by Forbes. I'm signing their paychecks right now. I was unconcerned by the headlines, didn't frame them, didn't forward them to my grandfather's former coworkers. However, I retained one, only one. I folded it. It was tucked away in the same folder as the original contract. Just a friendly reminder, not in retaliation, but without sound, as well as how it shatters. I returned to the hotel where I had spent 10 years prior on the eve of the shareholders' reorganization vote. Same structure. On the same floor. 419. I opened my laptop while sitting on the same tacky, flowery blanket. Additionally, this time, the agreement I observed was mine. Not changed, not broken, just like I had written it. With the screen's illumination shining on my face, I sat there in the dark, and I softly whispered, I prevailed. However, it didn't feel like a win. Not quite yet, because the game is yours to win, and continue to bear the consequences of the way it was performed. The clacking of doors. There was silence on the day of the voting, not a drama, not a swarm of press. It's just a dismal sky and the air that makes the city seem to be holding its breath. I wore black. I didn't have to. However, I did so because I wanted to, for there was something appropriate about it, such as burying my former self. The one who pleaded, the one who expressed regret for being overly noticeable, the one that they attempted to remove. When I entered the conference room, it was packed, identical table, same windows. It was the same opinion I had when I was deemed incompetent 5 years prior. Sitting 2 seats from the end, my father gazed at his hands. Pearls, perfect posture, and a blank expression were all part of my mother's disguise. In every room she ever controlled, she used silence as a weapon. Michael failed to show up, didn't give a call, didn't cast a ballot. Didn't matter. The vote to restructure was approved, unanimously. Phoenix Maritime took complete control of the shipping section, which is now my division, after it was split off into a distinct business. Every path, every resource, every transaction. The foundation of the entire business was now the clause they attempted to bury. As the board signed the last papers, I peered out the window. It's raining again. Since it was, of course, I then returned to my grandfather's office, left everything just as he had left it, an old globe, a leather chair, and a bottle of scotch that I never opened. On the desk, there was a box. The lawyer left. His penmanship read, "For her." Within, a picture of him and me on the docks at the age of 7, both of us smeared with salt, sun, and pride. When he was closing agreements, he wore his watch. A note, too. Only a single line. You were able to recall the routes. The compass was forgotten. Until the rain ceased, I sat there with the note. My mother arrived at the office a week later. No appointment. As if she still owned the building. She simply strolled past the front desk. The same subtle scent of the perfume she always wore to board meetings lingered behind her as she stood at my doorway. She said, "I guess I should congratulate you." She wasn't invited to sit, I said. "You no longer need to pretend. You owe me nothing at all." She blinked. Something flared behind her eyes. But it wasn't regret, not affection, something more ancient. She said, "You were never meant to be the one. I understand. This is not what you were made for." "You helped shape me," I said. "You simply didn't think I would make it through the fire." She didn't dispute, didn't offer an apology, just a single nod, and departed. I didn't see her again after that. After that, summer arrived quickly. The shareholders reached a settlement. Employees made adjustments. The business started to breathe again, and for the first time in years, I began to consider what might come next, what occurs when the conflict is over. When a conflict forged your entire identity, and the battle is now done, then, who are you? I had no idea. Some days, I still don't. The penthouse was sold by me, purchased a home close to the water. Not much. Simply be silent. Sometimes I just sit with my coffee on the dock out back, where the wind doesn't talk so loudly, and just be. Not a sound. No boardrooms. Not a ghost. Only me. I also converse with him occasionally. Not aloud. Not with words. However, you speak quietly to those who helped you grow. I inform him that the business is stable, that we own the roots. That, as he had taught her. The queen moved. The contract is still with me, now framed, in my office at home. The thumb drive next to it. It's the one with everything. I never made use of it in public. The video was never leaked. never made a press call because it wasn't worth it for them. Witnesses are not necessary for certain truths, only recollection. I received a letter from a former board member last week. Brief, written by hand. You were correct. We were mistaken. I wish you tranquility. I didn't respond. However, I kept it. I put it in the things I won't forget folder, adjacent to the others. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven them, if I pardoned him, and I'm never sure how to respond, because I don't step through the door of forgiveness. It's just a burden I put on. I still pick it up occasionally. There are times when I think back to that first time, standing in the rain and being told I was nothing, and it still hurts occasionally. However, not in the same manner. It aches like a scar now, not a cut. It serves as a reminder that I lived. This is not a tale of retaliation. It's not a tale about retaliation. When people try to erase you from your own life, it's a story about remembering who you are. It's a tale about quiet and what occurs when you break it at last. The business is doing well. Phoenix has grown in size. For once. Harrison is stable. And me, I'm simply here. Construction, not more loudly, not more irate. Simply put, more lucid. The queen is seldom in a hurry. However, as she moves, everyone is able to recall